I'm so glad to be back on the show. Thank you for having me. Trying to emphasize is the absolute importance of the struggle for freedom and how the freedom struggle is worldwide, it's historical, it is the march in the world of justice is a struggle for freedom. And we know that throughout history, and it's hard and it's rough, but we've got to recognize it, and we've got to acknowledge it, and we've got to be able to see it. And sometimes it seems to me that even among people who are very sympathetic and loving and very much towards the Palestinian cause, that we all need to also be reminded that it's a freedom struggle for self-determination and liberation. And we need to recognize this political aspect. So of course we need to extend all the humanitarian love and help, but we also have to recognize that in some ways, only thinking about this as a humanitarian issue, we lose the political struggle for freedom and self-determination. And many people say this is not an original idea to me. I'm drawing from the work of other scholars, but I'm also trying to remind us so that we can keep our energy and our support stronger and our solidarity stronger as we see the Palestinian people continue in their struggle for freedom and self-determination.
You note in your piece that, people see a lot of the images coming out of Gaza these past few months, and they feel sympathy toward Palestinians, but that it doesn't go farther than that. It does not contribute. The emotions that the images elicit in people don't go past sympathy to, oh my God, they're dying for their emancipation. It's just, oh, that's so terrible, poor Palestinians, and then people just go on. Do you think that attitude is a conditioning, is a product of the long-term indoctrination against Palestinians that comes from the U.S. and obviously its ally and vassal state Israel, but also just the disconnection of Palestinians as deserving of having their own land, having national sovereignty, like not being responsible enough to have their own state?
Yes, I think that you're absolutely right. And in some ways we can say this is a kind of racism. It's a kind of Islamophobia. It's also a kind of colonialist attitude where the colonizer always views the colonized as inept, as young, as insufficient, as unable. And then it's also, just as you said, it's a product of the long-standing kind of imperialist actions in this region of constant support for Israel and constant, basically just ignoring of Palestine, ignoring Palestinians, not even letting them have a seat at the table, not even letting them be part of a discussion about their own future. And so I think that we need to be mindful of the ways that unfreedom works, because there's different kinds of unfreedom, right? There's really blanket oppression that of course is what has been going on in Palestine for decades and decades and decades, and that we've really seen in the last 15 years with the siege that has just immiserated Gaza to the extent that even mainstream and conservative people called Gaza an open air prison, right? This was not a radical acknowledgement
Right.
that a people being having their electricity and their water and their food controlled by someone else, their inability to move or leave, right? Like everybody knew that this was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then to not think that a people could subjected to these would rise up, right? That seems like a little bit of a self-delusion, to think that any human people can just be oppressed and oppressed and oppressed and take it and that's it. And we see that. So I think we need to kind of recognize the reality of what happens when an oppressed people stands up and says, no more.
Jodi, isn't that the point at which we certainly know the U.S. government, in collusion with Israel, whenever people stand up, and for the U.S., it's not just Palestine, right? It's everywhere. It's
Right.
Haiti.
That's right.
It's
In Haiti, yes.
Congo. It's in Argentina with the right wing president that just it's Peru. It's everywhere. It's them still trying to coup President Maduro. It's still having Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, right? So for the United States, whenever an oppressed people rises up, that's like the second point at which the United States comes in with force and determines that these are all bad people. So where is the point at which that sympathy goes from, oh, that's so terrible what is being done to the Palestinians, and then of course there's the language that is used around how it's described. It's not, even the people who have sympathy will not say this is awful what Israel is doing to Palestine. What a lot of people will say is they will leave Israel out of the conversation altogether, and they will say, oh, it's horrible what's happening to Palestinians, without a discussion about who's doing it to them, why it's being done, and who's supporting the oppressors, right? So is it at some point that people, and I'm not talking about the government now, but just regular folks in the United States seeing all this, is it at some point where they believe that when Palestinians stop just dying in compliance, quietly, begging and praying, when they stop doing that, is that the moment that people are like, oh, these are all evil people? They don't deserve sympathy. They're evil.
The U.S. imperialism has and particularly in its institutions, has so many ways to try to keep us from recognizing people's freedom struggles. They call any kind of resistance violence, as if the system itself were not violent, as if the system itself did not rely on violent modes of imprisonment and policing and incarceration, right? We know that Israel takes and has taken thousands and thousands of Palestinian political prisoners, right? Young ones, children, teenagers. And so somehow that violence becomes invisible. But one of the ways that imperialism tries to blind us to real legitimate self-determination struggles is by calling resistance violence, and then by calling the resistors terrorist. By saying that any kind of resistor is, they did this to Nelson Mandela, for crying out loud. Everybody's favorite, but not when he was fighting the fight. So one of the things we all have to learn, and what's so inspiring with all of the students out there is they're learning this and they're teaching each other this and they're doing this in real time, and the consciousness is changing fast.
It is, and a little later on, we were going to try to get someone on who is in the encampment at GW, but logistics are moving the way they are, that's kind of difficult. And certainly we have to kind of weigh bringing a live interview with keeping the integrity of the protest and the safety of the students at hand. Right. So later we're going to talk to someone who was there yesterday, but I was there yesterday as well, and it was amazing Black Alliance for Peace and other organizations were out there providing support to the students. And of course, we're passing out materials. And I had said to my folks, don't focus so much on the students in the encampment, pass out the materials to the other students who are not participating. But a couple of the students who were in the encampment wanted the information. So as our folks were passing out stuff, a couple of the students came up and said, "Hey, what do you have? Can we have this?" So you're right, Jodi. They are literally learning some things, and we're having conversations with them, like in-depth conversations about the material that we're sharing with them. So the fascinating thing that we saw has been, while they're learning in real time, they're literally taking the information that they're learning that they didn't know much about before, immediately connecting it to the Palestinian struggle, and then almost immediately making it a part of the campaign, right? Making this new history a part of their chants and demands. And it's an amazing thing. But I think the most fascinating thing is that they're acting on what they've learned, like you said, in real time. They're not sitting on this information and waiting. And no, they're putting it all together right now, and they're putting it out there right now. And one of the things that I learned from talking to some of the Palestinian students and reading your article was the symbolism in some of the uprisings. Well, not some, all of the uprisings that have occurred in Palestine, particularly in Gaza. And one of those symbols is the kite. And you talk about that in the article. And I love this because I think this is a very important part of the discussion of culture's role in revolution. And so tell us the meaning, the symbolization of the use of kites and gliders in Palestinian resistance.
Oh, thank you so much for that question, because you're 100% right. It is part of the culture of Gaza and the culture of resistance, and how a people in resistance are imagining their freedom. And so the kites, the gliders, actually balloons as well, airports. These are all part of this general imaginary of flying and flight, where flying and flight is the symbol of liberation. Through, let's say, like the children flying kites, they say, so I talk in the piece about a really interesting documentary on about kites and about the children who set the world's record for the most kites on a single beach. And these children are quoted saying things like, "When I see my kite flying in the sky, I feel free, and I feel like my people are free," right? So they send up kites that look like the Palestinian flag, and they can imagine themselves now being free and not held down by walls, by barricades, by occupation. And then in the famous and beautiful poem by Rafat Alir, I think many people have heard this. He imagines, like, if he would die, he should be made him into a kite and by a string, and then a child would see him. And this is really a kind of powerful thing. Like we're not going to be defeated. Like, no matter what, we'll go on and we will sail above. And someone wrote me that in some ways that's like the kites are like these prayers and hopes already lifted up. And so it's a kind of unbelievable amount of inspiration associated with images of flying because of their connections with freedom. And I have to say, I was kind of surprised. I started doing a lot of reading in November and December, and just picked up these images and seeing like, oh, it repeats so many times from different kinds of paragliders in the struggle in 67, 68, then to different uses of kites and balloons in the around the Great March of Return. So it's a repeated image that's really powerful. And and one more thing on this, to me, it was also a really important counter, so that you just don't see like either Palestinians as wounded or dead or in tunnels, but soaring, right? Soaring into freedom.
That is amazing, and it is a powerful image, because if we understand the history, and for folks who don't know, history is my thing. I love it. I love history. It's fascinating, it's instructive, and it's kind of terrifying how we don't pay attention to history much in this country, particularly since we were talking a little bit before we came on air, Dr. Dean, that this feels like, and you and I have been around long enough to know what this feels like, because this, okay, I was born in 1967, so technically I don't know much what it feels like. But I remember, like, when I was 5 or 6, my mom telling me these stories about, well, first of all, my mom integrated her high school in a little town in Virginia. So then she comes to DC, and I'm growing up, and then, the Black Power movement emerges, and the African Liberation Day used to be a huge festival in DC, and now it's smaller, because of, just like, I think, the state of radical organizations in this country, particularly radical Black organizations, the repression from the state in the 60s as a response to people fighting for their liberation and for power, Black people in particular, was, it really eroded the strength, I think, or maybe the cohesion, I think is a better word, of that movement. So knowing that history and looking at this moment now, like, we were on the campus of GW last night, and I'm sitting there, and we're literally, we know the cops are like a block away, right? And we're just literally waiting for them to come and swoop down on these kids. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to one of my comrades. I'm like, man, I wonder who is watching this, or who is here, that realizes this is like 1968 remixed. Does this moment feel like this for you, watching what not just the state, because I think I expect it from the state, right? But I have a real problem with these administrators in these colleges and universities, who these students, and I said this when I spoke at the encampment last night, these students pay their salaries. Their tuition
Yeah.
pays their salaries. And they turn around and they're calling the police on their students who pay their salaries, because their students want to have a conversation that they're not comfortable with, because they don't want to anger their bosses and backers in Washington and Israel. I mean, that part is a different component. The foreign influence part, right? Because that's what it is. But outside of that, this is 1968 all over again, isn't it, Jodi?
Yeah, in so many ways, like the energy, the intensity, just the will of the students to go out there and refuse and say no and insist on change. I think one of the interesting possible differences is that in 68, college tuition was not as expensive,
Right.
and there was much more public support. Publicly funded, right? Like state funded education.
Right.
And so now I think this helps explain why these college presidents are reacting in such a horrible, horrible way, is they're essentially like corporate bosses at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not educators. They are not committed to any kind of like critical discussion or democratic discussion or education of citizens or education of critical thinkers. What matters to them is their endowments, their donors, and keeping order. And so this is why we're seeing them act now as instruments and hands of a repressive state, rather than maybe the hands of like a welfare state or a state that has some kind of semblance of a public interest in it. And this makes it a very scary situation. We also know from the 2020 uprisings and the revolt against racism and racist policing, that that many people have a will to go out, but also that police can be crazy and they can run amok and that they are the destabilizing force in this. Every single student encampment has been peaceful. They're out there like, making bracelets and doing embroidery and learning history.
Yeah.
Right? This is what they're doing. And what happens is the administrators call because they're worried that the students, are not complying with some stupid made up new regulations. And then they call the police, and the police just go nuts, right? Throwing people to the ground and beating them and making the entire thing worse than it would ever have to be. But then the students see what's happening here, and they see what's happening in countries all over the world, and they can make the connections.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And it's so interesting that you talked about how the students have been peaceful in these encampments. Like last night, because I'm so used to doing this whenever there are Muslims in a crowd of protesters and it's time for the Muslims to pray, I'm used to, watching as they set up, making sure they're safe, and then maybe surrounding them while they're praying so that nobody takes exploitative pictures of them, right? And because that has been done and used it, you posted on social media, all this kind of stuff, and made it, oh, look at the Muslims taking things over. And these people are just praying because I thought it was okay to pray. And we're supposed to not restrict the expression of religion, and the state is not supposed to sponsor a religion. So we're supposed to have freedom of expression of religion in this country, but we know how that goes. But it was interesting last night. I told my BAP comrades that we may have to do that, but there were so many people who were involved in prayer that it was just, you couldn't. But the atmosphere that the moment of prayer created was, I can't describe it as anything other than holy and spiritual and special and beautiful. It was quiet. There were probably 4, maybe 500 people, I think, on that, in that encampment, not just the students, but other, supporters in it. But it was quiet. And the imam is leading the prayer. One of the young brothers from who organized the event, I believe, recited the Adhan, and it was just gorgeous. So it was such an incredible moment of humanity. It's like, it was just like one of the moments that you are lucky to witness the beauty that comes from humanity, just the beauty of human expression in belief, and the same people are expressing the other human expression of love for your fellow humans. And it's just, even with the repression, Dr. Dean, this is a special time. It's a time that's fraught with tension, of course, but I also think it's a beautiful time. And I wonder, as we wrap up, how do you feel about this? Do you see any hope or beauty in this really difficult moment?
I think that what all of these young people are experiencing is something that can transform the entire culture. And it might take a while until the controllers, the ruling class, the so-called leaders of the mainstream parties, until they're gone, but there's so many young people, and they are experiencing unity across all sorts of differences. You don't have to be Muslim to appreciate the beauty of the moment you described. I've seen this in actions too. It's wonderful. It's really, and it's profound. Actually, I think for me, like, not being part of it, but to be able to support, right? And I think one of the things that we're all experiencing and seeing and learning is how to support people that you may have a whole bunch of differences from, whether or not it's differences of faith, differences of sexuality, of gender, differences, even differences of class, honestly, because we're seeing, I guess the old school term might be class traitors from some of these elite colleges as they come out in the struggle on behalf of oppressed and working class people all over the world. And so I think we've got to recognize that that's also an important moment when members of the elite want to say, oh, the world that has privileged us is not one that can continue. The world that has given us these benefits is not a good world. It is a world that has to be changed for the benefit of everyone. And so I think seeing all of these new possible combinations is something that's not going to go away. It's just going to get stronger. And I do have real hope for change.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that you have hope for change, because it's nice to come together with people who do still have hope and aren't, still stuck in the gloom and doom of how terrible this all is. It is, but in the struggle is where the hope is, because the struggle is moving the fight for liberation forward. Dr. Jodi Dean, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone, please read her blog in Verso Books Book Club blog. And the article is called Palestine Speaks for Everyone. Dr. Jodi Dean, thank you so much for joining me today. All right, you all, and thank you for joining. You are listening to Darker Than Blue here on WPFW in Washington, D.C., 89.3 on your FM radio dial. We just came off of listening to DJ Bobby Rocks, who I love. I encourage you to please listen to DJ Bobby Rocks. He's got fantastic taste in dance music, and his politics are pretty good too. And after this show, stay tuned for our friend Garland Nixon and News Views. But right now, I want to welcome my comrade and my friend, see you later, Dr. Dean, my comrade and my friend, Erica Ryan, the coordinator for the Baltimore Citywide Alliance for the Black Alliance for Peace, the founder of Liberation Through Reading, and one of the editors of Hood Communist blog, which if you are not reading it, stop listening to this show until you read it. There you go. Erica, what's going on? Thank you for joining me.
Peace, Shaggy.
Peace. How are you so refreshed after that long day yesterday? How are you so refreshed?
I know, and a long day today as well.
Right. Yeah. So we were at the GW encampment yesterday. And again, for folks who are listening, if you just tuned in, we were hoping to get someone from the encampment today onto the show, but obviously that's very difficult as they're holding rallies, they're doing speak outs, they're coordinating food and supplies, and they're really focused on what they are doing there. Sean is there right now, holding it down for PSL and for Darker Than Blue. I've got other things to do tonight. Like, that's the thing, right, Ricky, that in the midst of all of this that's going on with the students who are just doing an amazing job advocating for themselves, we still have other stuff we got to do. And it's interesting in the life of an organizer how sometimes your priorities change based on the political climate that we're in. I mean, so how was it for you knowing that as an organization, BAP was gearing up for the Haiti Day of Action? We had other things in Baltimore. You guys finished up a fantastic town hall series. We're planning to start a town hall series in DC, planning that. We're doing an event tonight, tabling at the SNCC round table tonight at Howard University. We'll probably be attending the Haitian movie Mountains tomorrow, because we couldn't attend it yesterday because we had to be at the encampment. So this is the life of an organizer, right? And if you got health problems, I got osteoarthritis in both knees. The knees don't care. You don't know what the movement, the struggle doesn't care how bad my knees hurt, right? Because we just need to be there to support people. So how is it for you? I mean, was this the first time you have experienced something like this? And how was it for you being there?
Yeah, well, yesterday, as you mentioned, the Black Alliance for Peace Haiti Americas team has had a series, monthly series of days of action since February 29th, which marked 20 years since the coup of Aristide. which led to the UN occupation with MINUSTA, which then turned into BNU, and it's still an ongoing situation. So we wanted to recognize that because at the time, Ariel Henry was still the illegitimate leader of Haiti, and we were raising the concerns of Kenya and CARICOM colluding, excuse me if you hear my son, CARICOM and Kenya colluding to occupy Haiti alongside the US and the UN. So in this series of monthly actions, yesterday was actually the last of the months. A big event that we were planning to do, which was a speak out, which is just getting out into the streets and talking to people about what's happening in Haiti. And we were posted up at one of our favorite restaurants to patron, which is Francois Caribbean Cuisine on 218 Liberty Street in Baltimore. So if you're out, go eat it. It's really good food. But they're also, it's a Haitian restaurant. So they have really ties and roots to Haiti, and they have an investment in Haiti, and they always allow us to leave our materials and propaganda there. And they were like, yeah, sure, come in and talk to the people. And we got to interview the owner about his take on what's happening. And he's from Baltimore. He's a Haitian from Baltimore. So seeing the dynamics of how those two things kind of align in certain ways, like the colonial aspect of Baltimore and what's happening in Port-au-Prince specifically, but Haiti overall. They could see the parallels there, and he was able to express that. We talked to a plethora of people out in the streets, and we were there for really a lunch break. We were there for 2 hours, but we got a lot of accomplished and able to talk to a lot of different people, got people to sign up, got people to, make the call for Hands Off Haiti. And it was a very positive event. And then we checked the chat, and DC is at George Washington University. We're like, well, you know what? Let's go. My mother could pick up my son from the bus, and we're on our way. And we went with our signs and our flag, and we were on 295, and we were at George Washington University. And to what you mentioned, I always talk about mobilization versus organization, primarily because I never did the whole Black Lives Matter protest. You would never catch any images of me in any of those things, right? But that has not deterred me from a particular understanding of the dynamics of what we are going through. So I'm never like, yes, let's go to the mobilization, right? That's not my first and foremost. But I do believe that if you do go to the mobilization, like, be of use, right? Don't just go there to be taking pictures, because especially if you're an organizer. I've made my criticisms about what I would like to see. And I appreciated being there to be able to have done that. I talked about making the connections to the deadly exchange, right? If we're talking about the overt policing of these students, then we have to make the connection to the ways that a lot of these police officers across the country are trained by the IOF, right? So we have to really emphasize that. And then, because it was still the Haiti Day of Action, we went to GW talking about Haiti and talking to people about the colonial connection between Haiti and Palestine, and why these two things matter, and what the primary contradiction of imperialism is, and how Zionism plays a role. So it's really, really important for us to be able to do that, not just raise criticisms, but be active in what you would like to see. And the students were very receptive. I mean, there was a point where we were just sitting and people just walked up to us. What's BAP about?
Right.
Can we interview you? Talk about what you're doing. What's going on in Haiti? We would love to discuss. Where do we learn more? They were very much interested in that. And I appreciated being there, because what it has shown, especially since October 7th, and I think this is something my comrade Rafiki had mentioned, is that we didn't just pop up in these spaces after October 7th. We had already built a groundwork with PYM as an organization, especially regionally with DMV PYM. So we were doing summer schools, we were showing up at events and teach-ins and supporting one another. So when these things happened, there was already a base. Same thing with student organizations. We were already working with student organizations, trying to figure out how we can make a cohesive connection, showing up at their teach-ins, offering our support to what the students were doing, especially during the Howard incident, right? When the housing was, we really were active and showing up, and we kept those connections so that when things like this happens, they know to call Black Alliance for Peace, because we have been there, right? So we're not just showing up to say, oh, look, we're here to support. We were actually actively asked to come through and to come support and to come offer and to come talk about the things that we would like to see. And I think that that speaks to the point of laying a groundwork and base building and how important that is. I mean, it's slow. You know, you don't see the fruit right away, but when things happen, you know, you see that it. Yesterday was a great day, and I think it was because we had developed those sides of relationships, so we're able to show up and be there.
Yeah, it really was. And it was very humbling, I think, for me to have the comrades at PYM call us and, you know, say, listen, can you support? I'm going to add you to this chat with, but I just want to make sure you all can be there. And then when we're there, you know, we had been there for a few hours. So we decided, oh, let's go have lunch and come back. And then our comrade is calling us while we were out at lunch, because, you know, we're past middle age. We can't go without a meal and the bathroom for a long time. We can't do that. So she's calling us. Are you all here? Can you come speak? And we're like, yeah. So we're wrapping up lunch and we are, you know, scooting back to the campus and get on the mic. And what's the first thing we talk about? Haiti, because it is the Haiti Day of Action, and because the struggle in Haiti is the same as the struggle in Palestine, is the same as the struggle in the Congo. Part of that struggle is about land. It's certainly about oppression, but a part of that struggle is about land, these people defending their land. So I'm curious, Erica, how did you feel about, and I'm trying to set the stage here for people who were not there, because there has been this constant narrative that the protests, these encampments, have been violent, and the students have been attacking or assaulting or making Jewish students afraid. At GW, there's the main encampment, and yesterday there were maybe 5 young men. I'm assuming they were students of GW, but they had a big Zionist flag, and a smaller kind of Zionist / US flag. It was probably one of the most offensive things I've ever seen. It's like, how sick do you have to be to create that? But, you know, this is a sick society. So they are there, and they're not doing anything. They're just there because they're trying to provoke a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you feel about how that shook out? how that worked out? I'm not going to give it away. How did you feel about how that went?
I mean, I didn't feel much about it. I mean, honestly, I think you know, if I were to be honest, I thought it was pathetic, right? That's my first thought, because why? You know, there's no actual reason to be there except to antagonize. And then they had like flyers, I think, that were going around that defense of Hamas is anti-Semitic. So they were intentionally trying to antagonize a crowd that paid them no mind. Paid them absolutely no mind. I think they were like secluded into a point of isolation where they had to stay in this one spot because everyone had their backs to them, right? So and it kept going, right? The rally kept going, the music kept going, the drums kept going. So they did nothing but, you know, stand there and hold some flags, and take pictures. I must say there was a lot of picture taking.
Mm-hmm.
That was not missed.
Right.
But yeah, there was a lot of picture taking. But other than that, you know, they were isolated. And I guess to that extent, right, then you could say the isolation makes you feel unsafe. But like, I mean, it's not a serious matter, right? We're talking about it. We're talking about people who are, or students primarily, who are taking these risks for Gaza, right? And to raise a particular awareness about the actual normalization about how much these universities are tied to the military-industrial complex. And more than Palestine, which I do think that this is why we keep insisting that Palestine is a very important moment. It may not be the moment that people don't want to prioritize, Of course. What about the Congo? What about all these other places? But I think what is significant about Palestine is that it opens the door to discuss these things, so that we can actually really get to the root of what's happening in the Congo. We can actually get to the root of what's happening in Sudan, in Haiti, because it has opened a particular door for an understanding of what's going on. When we talk about what these universities are complicit in, we have been to, at back Baltimore, when I say we have been able to speak with a student organization at UMBC, and they invited us to speak to about AFRICOM, and they wanted to primarily because that university has a research team and lobby where they do, in fact, funnel students from UMBC into Lockheed Martin, making weapons for AFRICOM. There's a direct connection to all of these things, and universities are truly complicit. And I think the idea that it would start at Palestine is a incredible idea for me, because again, like I said, we can show up in these spaces and say, oh wait, it doesn't just stop there. It goes on. It's even deeper than that. Did you know your school was also doing this and this? And how do we sharpen those contradictions? Because the students are ready. And I've seen that yesterday. They are ready. Now, to what extent they get shifted, to what extent they can be moved into an organization, that depends on the organizers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it is really interesting to look back at the way we have organized and had developed connections with these students, because we did find out that, colleges and universities, institutions like Howard University, have an office for basically almost every U.S. government intelligence agency on the campus. There is an office for the FBI there. They got recruiters for the CIA, the NSA, and of course they have the whole UARC program, university affiliated research program that's from the Department of Defense. And then we find out that all of these universities, Howard, University of Maryland, Georgetown, George Washington, most of them have like sponsored buildings or dorms that are sponsored by defense contractors. So, we find this out, and then we're connecting this to the repression that we are feeling in our neighborhoods, against our movements. And then October 7 happens. And then, of course, we're able, like you said, to make all of these connections to that, and then connect that to everything else we've been talking about for, well, ever since BAP has been around. And it was good to see students. It was great to see you all talking to students, because I had kind of wanted you not to give the material out to the students in the encampment, because I figured, well, they're here, they, and just focus on the people who weren't there. But that was the perfect thing to do, because seeing you all talk to the students, but really seeing them practically chase you down. Like you would be walking. I saw you walk away from one conversation, going to somewhere else, and someone came up behind you, like literally running, tapped you on the shoulder, and like, can we have some thoughts? And I'm like, wow, this is the moment that organizers are always looking for, right? Other people who are not involved in the organization probably wouldn't get how special and exciting and just amazing that moment was. But for organizers, this moment was gold. It's what we always look for, that captive audience that we can sit down and have a conversation with, and not preach to them, but connect our struggles and build that bond. How do you think your organizing will be impacted by this experience from yesterday? Because I know we're going to be out there many other days. We'll probably be out there tomorrow morning, and then we're going to try to go to a movie. I honestly don't know how y'all think I'm going to do all this, but especially since somebody didn't bring me any Haitian food to fortify me. So I don't know how I'm going to be able to have the energy to keep this up.
Yeah, you got to speak to John. But
but yeah, how do you see? Do you think this moment from yesterday will impact or change your organizing in any way? And for organizers, how should it? Should it?
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about having laid those foundations, is one incident I was thinking about, and this is when you all had left to go eat, and I feel like we just were like covering your lunch break a little bit, because we were sitting at the bench and people were walking by, and there was this one student, and she had just quickly glanced, and then she realized who she saw, and she's like, "Oh my God!" you are all the Black Lions for Peace? Wait, hold on. My boyfriend, he used to go to Morgan, but now he goes to Howard. And we instantly, both of us, me and Jamila, knew exactly who she was talking about. We like, oh, such and such. And she's like, yes, it's him. And I've been to your town halls before with him. So this is a student who goes to GW, who has a partner who goes to Howard, who we worked with when he went to Morgan, and she recognized us in our work, and we exchanged, and she was like, "Oh, look, can I take a picture? He's gonna be so excited! I'm here with you all!" Like, she's really excited to have just run into us and seen us on this campus and engaging it. And she stood there and talked to us a little bit about the Day of Action and just the work that we're doing, and then her own organization, student organization, and interest in linking up with BAP and doing something on that campus. So again, we were able to make these connections from a foundation that we were already slowly building. And this is something that we're trying to take across the region, as a Mid-Atlantic region, not just ciphering and siloing ourselves into these citywide alliances that, only BAP DC and only BAP Baltimore. I think we make a really good effort to be at each other's events, to support each other, especially leaving Baltimore to come to GW and assist you all in supporting these students and who are supporting Gaza, right? And for the larger cause of what's going on. And being able to hand out materials and make the connections and kind of expand what you all were already doing. And I think that reach made a really good impact, not just on what was happening, but I think on the organizers, like on the membership of BAP, right? To be able to go from one thing to the next. I mean, we've all talked about how great yesterday was. Yesterday was a great organizing day, because we spoke to people all day about BAP stuff. Like, when people tell you you have to, change the language, you can't talk to people about imperialism. I don't recall not saying imperialism at any point to people walking up and down the street. But I also explained what that is when I say that these domestic and global imperialism is connected. And I say, well, look at Haiti and look at Baltimore. Look at what's happening in Palestine. Look at what's happening with these students right now in DC.
Right.
How
Look at what happened with the crime bill in DC.
How are they not counting? Right. And I think that was the beauty of yesterday, that we were able to test that, right? That people say you can't do that. People don't understand the language. People are not going to get it. And we did it with students who people normally, they fraternize, and they always try to say, well, the students are not going to get it. They're too young. But they were ready. And not just students, but people that we talked to in the street in Baltimore. So yesterday was a fantastic organizing day. And I think especially for the membership, and I really appreciated yesterday for them to be able to have experienced that day in that way.
Yeah,
because I think it activated all of us.
Oh yeah, that's one of those it's a rare kind of thing, right? Like it's hard to do that kind of one-on-one outreach at like a mass turnout for Gaza kind of a demonstration like there have been in the past couple of months, because it's hard to do outreach among 500,000 people who are all about to march to the White House, right? But this was the perfect opportunity. And it really was like an organizer's, like you're sitting there like, oh, this is great. But for the students, though, for the organizers, for us who were there to support the students, of course, we're looking at what we can contribute to advancing the conversation, right? As well as supporting the students with whatever they need, material needs, because we contributed for supplies or contributed money for supplies, because you run out of things and you don't know and you just don't have time. You just send somebody to the store, that kind of thing. But there is still the reality that these students, as much fun as they clearly have, and in the midst of a very serious action, there's still the reality of police repression. So when did the cops finally show up last night? Because they threatened to shut the encampment down, clear it out by 7 p.m. And by the time we left at 8, they had brought some of the transport vans up, but they still had not entered the quad area where the encampment is. So what finally happened with them? Did they finally show up? Were people arrested?
Well, we left around 9 because I have a child that has to go to school. So, you know, so
Another
we stayed as long
reality
as
of
we could.
organizers, we have
Yeah, we stayed
lives.
as long as we could. But again, to your point, they said they were going to bust it up at 6, and then
That's
nothing
right. It
happened at
was 6 at
7,
first. Yeah.
and then nothing happened at 8, and then nothing happened at 9. But I think we did get the alert this morning that they closed off the yard, so they're not going to let outside people in, and then they're kind of locking the students into the yard, I guess, I suppose. But it's a way to monitor it. So I haven't heard any updates since this morning. But I know comrades are going down there still.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Still, and I know a few are on their way to still go support the students and see for themselves exactly what's going on instead of waiting for the word. So yeah, I'm really really motivated about what's happening, especially so much. As I said, you know, I can be self-critical, but I also don't think that I was raising any particular criticism about what the students were doing, but more so what I would like to have seen, because it wasn't being shown, right? You were just
Yeah.
seeing the violence, right? Or the atmosphere, the
Mm-hmm.
comradeship, the camaraderie, right?
Right.
But you
Right.
weren't seeing the actual, like, what is mobilization. There was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of footage of mobilization.
Mm-hmm.
And I always want to bring home the point that mobilization is great, but organizing is where the change actually happens, right? Because
Exactly.
it's the organize, especially when you can organize a fantastic mobilization, like the way that we seen yesterday was produced. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they were really set up in such a way that I think everybody, like you said, to your point, when the prayer happened, I listened earlier. That was just, I think I was stuck. I don't think I moved because I
Yeah.
couldn't, I just watched it all happen and I was just bewildered by it. It was a very remarkable experience, but to see that was most of the part, right?
Yeah, it
Because
was.
you just said, we got to stand around them and help them secure the area, but then it was like, well, that's the whole party,
Right.
like
That's
that's
everybody.
it. Like it was just like a little square of us on the grass, like that
Right.
was just sitting down and staying quiet. But yeah, it was a remarkable experience to have seen that, especially when we were just amped up and cheering and still rallying
Mm-hmm.
and saying, we're not going home, and then to hear the imam speak and
Yeah.
really tie in that message, I think really solidified the students staying.
Mm-hmm.
I think after that, they were like, "Oh no,
Oh
we're
yeah.
good."
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it gave them the extra boost, and I think it also gave us the confidence to, okay, we can go. I think we're good. I think the
Yeah.
students are good. I think we can go.
Yeah, that's the key, and thanks for bringing that up because you know we Sean and I we've been when we were on By Any Means Necessary. I was on for 4 years with him as the host. He was on the show for since the show started, I believe. So he had been there for 7 years, and Eugene started that show, and these are all organizers. So that's what we talked about. So we've been talking about organizing for at least me and Sean at least for the past 5 years. So and it is what I do. It is my life. It is really, I think, the reason I'm supposed to be here. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of us in BAP and a lot of the people I work with in PSL and all these other, I think they feel the same way. And it's not like because of popularity or because we don't have anything else to do. It's because this system needs to change, and we're the only ones who are going to change it. We're the ones who are going to change it, not necessarily us in these particular organizations. When I say we, I mean the people are going to change this system. But
right.
somebody has to educate the people on the fact that the system needs to be changed. And this is the struggle we face in this organizing moment. There are a lot of people siding with the empire, siding with the state, particularly in this issue with Palestine, or not even being concerned about what the state is doing in other places like Congo and Haiti and that kind of stuff. And it is our responsibility as organizers to raise these issues among our people, to educate our people on these issues, because that's the thing that gets people into the streets, Ricky. it's
Hmm.
it's it's not, it's not usually just people having, whatever type of heart people think, people going to protest need to have. It is the knowledge that something is deeply wrong and the understanding that we, the people, are the ones who can change it. That's what gets people into the streets.
Hmm.
And organizers do that. So all the time. We're having to juggle our personal lives and all of our responsibilities back here, Mr. I've just figured out how to get the toilet paper off the roll and eat it.
Oh no. Oh, it was
And
an adventure.
yeah, a little bit of an adventure. We've got to organize to juggle our personal lives, our marriages, our families, our children, our jobs, our own education, everything else we have to do in our life. We have to do this juggling almost on the spot a lot of times, to prioritize serving the people. So we're going to continue to do that. We in the Black Alliance for Peace, we in Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Anti-Coalition, Palestinian Youth Movement, Students for Justice in Palestine, Friends of the Congo, Pan-African Community Action, All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're going to keep doing the work.
Mhm.
As long as those students are at GW, we will be there with them. So some of us will be there tomorrow. If they're there the day after, we'll be there then. If they're there next week, guess where we'll be? This is organizing, because we're fighting for, not for popularity or exposure, we're fighting for our future. So we have to fight together. So thanks so much, Erica Ryan, for joining me and giving us your insights about the encampment yesterday. I will see you, if not tonight, because tabling at the SNCC event at Howard University.
I'm
I'll
gonna
see you
see a few
tomorrow at
customers.
the encampment.
Yeah, yeah. In the meeting.
Right, at the encampment first, and then the movie later, where we'll probably do some more canvassing for Haiti. This is the life of an organizer, y'all. And this is what we do here in Darker Than Blue in Washington, D.C. on WPFW 89.3. For those of you watching on Black Power Media, no double feature tonight because I have to table at a SNCC event. So thank you so much for joining us this week. Join us next week for another fantastic show here on Darker Than Blue. Stay tuned for Garland Nixon and News Views. I'll see you all next week. Peace.
All right, ma'am.